The forest floor trembles. A golden-furred lemur, no larger than a house cat, freezes mid-leap between bamboo stalks in the mountainous rainforests of southeastern Madagascar. Her amber eyes scan the canopy, not for predators, but for the sound that shouldn't exist here. Chainsaws. This is a greater bamboo lemur, and she possesses something extraordinary, the ability to metabolize cyanide. The bamboo she depends on contains toxins that would kill most mammals, yet she devours 12 species of it daily. Her body evolved over millions of years to process what others cannot. But evolution didn't prepare her for this. The systematic destruction of her bamboo groves, habitat fragmented into islands too small to sustain her family groups. Fewer than 1,000 of her kind remain. The greater bamboo lemur, perfected across millennia to master one of Earth's most challenging diets, now fights for survival in forests that shrink by acres each day. Can we save what's almost lost? Chapter 1. The Indri, the ghost of Madagascar's rainforest. With eyes like polished obsidian and a haunting song that carries for 2 miles through morning mist, this creature represents something Madagascar will never recover if lost. The Indri, the largest living lemur, hasn't been seen in vast stretches of forests where their calls once echoed daily. Local communities call them Babakoto, Little Father, believing them to be ancestors watching over the land. The Indri belongs to the family Indridae, a group of lemurs characterized by reduced tails and vertical clinging locomotion. Standing nearly 3 feet tall with distinctive black and white markings like a living panda, the Indri moves through the canopy with balletic precision, launching its body between trees in spectacular leaps that can span 30 feet. Their most remarkable feature isn't physical, it's their voice. Indri family groups perform elaborate morning duets, complex songs lasting up to 3 minutes with distinct phrases and harmonics. These aren't random calls, but sophisticated communication encoding territory boundaries, family bonds, and possibly even emotional states. Each family group's song is unique, a vocal fingerprint passed between generations. These lemurs occupy the primary rainforests of eastern Madagascar, from Marojeji in the north to Andohahela in the south, though their range has contracted by over 40% in just 2 decades. They live in small family units of 2 to 6 individuals, extremely territorial and monogamous, with offspring remaining with parents for years before establishing their own territories. The Indri's ecological role is irreplaceable. They're primary seed dispersers for dozens of tree species, including many that produce large fruits no other animal can swallow whole. Their feeding behavior shapes the very structure of Madagascar's rainforests. They consume leaves, fruits, and flowers from over 70 plant species, requiring vast territories of intact forest. Each family needs roughly 40 acres of pristine habitat to survive. But pristine habitat is precisely what Madagascar no longer offers. Slash-and-burn agriculture, called Tavy, has consumed 90% of Madagascar's original forests. Logging companies target valuable hardwoods like rosewood and ebony, carving roads deep into previously inaccessible Indri habitat. These roads become highways for further destruction. Subsistence farmers follow, clearing land for rice paddies and cattle pastures. Mining operations have fragmented key populations, and climate change is altering the phenology of fruiting trees that Indri depend on for seasonal nutrition. The species faces an additional, insidious threat. They will not reproduce in captivity. Despite decades of attempts, no zoo has successfully bred Indri. Every individual lost in the wild is permanent, irreplaceable. The species' slow reproduction, females give birth only once every 3 years, means populations cannot recover from losses. Political instability in Madagascar has emboldened illegal loggers and made conservation enforcement nearly impossible in remote regions. Yet there is movement in the stillness. The Mitsinjo Association, a local conservation group, has pioneered a community-led reforestation program that's restored over 500 acres of Indri habitat, creating corridors between isolated forest fragments. They employ former loggers as forest guardians who monitor Indri populations using acoustic recording technology, microphones placed throughout the forest. Capture and analyze Indri songs, tracking family groups without disturbing them. Tourism provides alternative income. Visitors pay premium rates for guided dawn expeditions to hear Indri songs, money that flows directly to villages committed to forest protection. Scientists have mapped the Indri's complete genome, offering hope that future assisted reproduction techniques might overcome their captivity breeding barrier. Protected areas like Analamazaotra Special Reserve have maintained stable Indri populations for 15 years, proof that intensive protection works. The opportunity exists in Madagascar's young population, 60% under 25 years old. Environmental education programs are reaching children who've never seen an Indri, instilling conservation values before economic pressures cement destructive practices. Carbon credit programs now pay communities to maintain forests as carbon sinks, potentially generating more income than logging. International partnerships are training Malagasy conservationists who bring both scientific expertise and cultural understanding to protection efforts. The Indri's survival hinges on whether these scattered successes can scale before the chainsaws reach the last forest strongholds. Chapter 2. The the phantom primate of the night. Imagine a creature so strange that local legend declares seeing one means death within the year. The emerges after sunset, its skeletal middle finger tapping tree bark in rhythmic patterns, listening for the subtle echoes of insect larvae tunneling beneath the surface. This finger, grotesquely elongated and constantly moving, is one of evolution's most bizarre solutions to a simple problem: how to extract protein from inside wood. The iai is the world's largest nocturnal primate and the only member of its family, Daubentonidae, making it evolutionarily irreplaceable. Its rodent-like teeth grow continuously throughout life, used to gnaw through tough wood after that specialized finger locates prey. Massive eyes capture moonlight, ears rotate independently like satellite dishes, and its bushy tail exceeds body length. The ii has reinvented woodpecker ecology using primate anatomy. Percussive foraging combined with echolocation like acoustic analysis. They detect larvae by the sound signatures of their feeding tunnels, then use those ever-growing incisors to expose chambers before fishing out insects with that remarkable finger. Beyond insects, they consume nectar, seeds, and fungi, but their primary ecological role is insect population control in Madagascar's forests. These nocturnal foragers once ranged across all Madagascar's forests, from coastal areas to mountainous regions. Now they're confined to scattered patches, and their reputation as harbingers of doom makes them targets. The iai occupies a tragic space in Malagasy folklore. Fadi, or taboo. Many communities believe iais can point their death finger at humans to curse them, or that finding one near a village means someone will die. The consequence is immediate. Iais are killed on sight in many regions. These superstitions, passed through generations, have created a cultural barrier to conservation more formidable than any physical threat. Habitat destruction compounds the cultural persecution. Coastal forests where iis reach highest densities have been decimated for coconut and lychee plantations. The species adapts poorly to habitat fragmentation. They're solitary with enormous home ranges, males patrolling territories exceeding 500 acres. Forest fragments simply cannot support viable populations. Hunting for bushmeat, while not traditionally targeting IAIs, has increased as Madagascar's growing population faces food insecurity. Climate change is shifting the distribution of their primary food trees, particularly species of traveler's palm and coconut, that provide crucial resources. Introduced predators, especially feral dogs, kill IAIs encountered foraging on the ground. The combination of cultural hatred, habitat loss, and slow reproduction, females rear only one infant every 3 years, creates a demographic crisis. The Duke Lemur Center in North Carolina has successfully bred IAIs for over 3 decades, maintaining a genetic reserve and advancing reproductive science. These captive populations serve as insurance against extinction and as ambassadors changing perceptions. Thousands of schoolchildren worldwide have learned that IAIs aren't demons, but marvels of adaptation. In Madagascar, conservationists work with village elders and traditional healers, the Ombiasi, to challenge fady beliefs. Some communities have embraced new interpretations, declaring IAIs sacred rather than cursed, protecting them as spiritual guardians rather than destroying them as threats. The Madagascar Biodiversity Partnership operates community-managed reserves where IAI populations are monitored and protected. Technology offers unexpected advantages. Infrared camera traps document IAIs in areas presumed empty, revealing the species is more widespread than surveys suggested, though at critically low densities. Genetic analysis of museum specimens and living populations provides roadmaps for maintaining diversity in fragmented groups. Ecotourism operators offer night walks where visitors can observe wild IAIs. These encounters generate revenue while demonstrating that living IAIs have economic value. The challenge is expanding these local successes into a national conservation culture before superstition and habitat loss erase this evolutionary marvel from Earth's catalogue of life. The numbers tell a story of acceleration. The greater bamboo lemur population stands at approximately 800 individuals scattered across 5 isolated forest fragments. This represents a 94% decline over the past 60 years. A species that once ranged across thousands of square miles of bamboo forest now clings to existence in patches totaling less than 50 square miles. The Indri population, estimated between 2,000 and 10,000 individuals, has declined by 80% over 3 generations, or roughly 36 years. Only 10% of their original rainforest habitat remains intact, and that figure drops by 1 to 2% annually. Conservation costs are staggering. Maintaining protected habitat, anti-poaching patrols, and community development programs averages $4,200 per lemur per year. For the IAI, numbers are murkier because of their nocturnal habits, but population trends show 50% declines over 20 years in studied areas. Remaining habitat constitutes perhaps 15% of historical range, fragmented into pieces too small to support stable populations. The cost of captive breeding programs, essential given cultural persecution, exceeds $8,000 annually per individual. Chapter 3. The Ploughshare Tortoise, the golden jewel of Madagascar's north. In the dry, deciduous forests of northwestern Madagascar, a creature wearing armor of gold moves through leaf litter with ancient patience. The ploughshare tortoise, called angonoka locally, carries a shell of such striking beauty that it has become both its evolutionary masterpiece and its death sentence. Each individual displays unique patterns of gold, brown, and black, making them instantly identifiable and irresistibly valuable to collectors willing to pay $50,000 on black markets for a single animal. This tortoise belongs to the genus Astrocalis, endemic to Madagascar, and represents the rarest tortoise on Earth. Adults reach lengths of 17 inches, with dramatically domed carapaces and a distinctive forward-projecting gular scute, the ploughshare that males use in combat, attempting to flip rivals during breeding competition. These are not the slow, docile creatures of children's stories, but surprisingly aggressive animals that engage in elaborate dominance battles, sometimes lasting hours. Males produce vocalizations during mating, unusual among tortoises, and females exhibit nest site fidelity, returning to the same locations across decades. They're remarkably long-lived, with individuals documented at over 150 years old, meaning tortoises alive today may have witnessed Madagascar before French colonization. The ploughshare tortoise evolved in the bamboo and dry deciduous forests of Bali Bay National Park and surrounding areas, a tiny range totaling perhaps 25 square miles. This specialized habitat features mixed vegetation, bamboo thickets, baobab trees, and seasonal grasslands, creating a mosaic environment that provides food year-round. They're herbivores consuming grasses, forbs, and the fruits of shrubby plants, with strong seasonal preferences tied to rainfall patterns. Ecologically, they're ecosystem engineers on a small scale. Their grazing behavior shapes plant community composition, and their movement patterns create trails used by smaller animals. They're also seed dispersers for several plant species, particularly those producing large fruits or seeds that pass undigested through their systems. But the ploughshare tortoise faces a threat unprecedented in the natural world: targeted extinction-level poaching driven by collectors. International demand, particularly from wealthy collectors in Southeast Asia and the Middle East, has created a criminal enterprise focused exclusively on extracting these tortoises from the wild. Organized poaching networks operate with military-style precision. Scouts locate animals, extraction teams collect them, smugglers route them through Madagascar's porous borders, and dealers sell them to collectors who view them as living trophies. Every adult female removed from the wild eliminates decades of reproductive potential. Habitat loss, while less immediate than poaching, still threatens. Local communities convert forest to agricultural land, particularly for maize cultivation, and charcoal production destroys crucial vegetation. Invasive plants alter habitat composition, and introduced predators like rats and feral dogs destroy nests and kill hatchlings. Fires, both natural and human-set, sweep through dry season landscapes, killing tortoises sheltering in vegetation. The response has been unprecedented. The Durrell Wildlife Conservation Trust established a captive breeding program that has produced over 400 offspring, creating an insurance population against extinction. These captive-bred individuals are reintroduced to protected sites, but with a crucial modification. Conservationists etch codes into their shells, making them worthless to collectors who prize pristine specimens. Armed patrols guard Bailey Bay National Park around the clock, funded by international donors who recognize this species crisis. Community engagement programs provide alternative livelihoods: beekeeping, ecotourism guiding, sustainable agriculture, reducing local dependence on habitat conversion. Legal frameworks have strengthened. Madagascar now enforces some of the world's strictest anti-trafficking penalties, with poachers facing decades in prison. Technology is the newest ally. GPS tracking devices implanted in wild tortoises reveal their movement patterns and habitat use, allowing targeted protection. Drones patrol the national park, detecting intruders before they reach tortoise populations. Genetic monitoring ensures captive breeding maintains diversity, preventing inbreeding depression. International cooperation has shut down smuggling routes. Enforcement agencies from Interpol to US Fish and Wildlife Service coordinate operations, that intercept shipments and arrest trafficking networks. The most promising development may be cultural. Younger Malagasy generations increasingly view the Angonoka as a national treasure rather than a commodity, a shift in values that could prove decisive. Chapter 4. The Northern Sportive Lemur, the invisible survivor of limestone forests. In the jagged limestone formations of northern Madagascar, where rock formations called tsingji create stone forests of razor-sharp pinnacles, a small lemur disappears into crevices barely wide enough for its body. The northern sportive lemur, weighing less than 2 pounds, has mastered life in one of Earth's most unforgiving landscapes, but mastery of a harsh environment offers no protection from chainsaws and cattle. Sportive lemurs belong to the family Lepidemuridae, nocturnal leaf-eaters with specialized digestive systems capable of processing toxic foliage other animals cannot touch. The northern sportive lemur exhibits the characteristic large eyes and pointed ears of nocturnal primates, with grayish-brown fur that blends seamlessly with limestone rock and dead wood. They're vertical clingers, launching between rock faces and tree trunks with powerful hind legs. Their name derives from defensive postures. When threatened, they rise on hind legs with fists raised like boxers, a comical appearance masking genuine aggression. These lemurs are fiercely territorial and largely solitary outside breeding season, with individuals occupying and defending specific limestone crevices that serve as daytime refuges. This species inhabits the dry, deciduous forests and limestone tsingy formations of northern Madagascar, particularly in the Ankarana Special Reserve and surrounding fragments. The tsingy creates unique microclimates. Shadowed crevices remain cool and humid even during the brutal dry season, while exposed platforms bake under tropical sun. Northern's sportive lemurs exploit this heterogeneity, selecting sleeping sites in deep crevices where temperature and humidity remain stable, then emerging at night to forage in surrounding forest. They consume primarily leaves, selecting species based on protein content and toxin levels, which shift seasonally. Their digestive strategy involves microbial fermentation. They possess enlarged ceca, where bacteria break down cellulose and detoxify plant compounds. This allows them to subsist on food sources few other animals can process, but it also makes them vulnerable to dietary stress if forest composition changes. The threats converge from multiple directions. Slash-and-burn agriculture has cleared forests surrounding the tsingy, leaving isolated habitat islands in a sea of degraded land. Cattle grazing removes understory vegetation, eliminating crucial foraging areas and compacting soil, preventing forest regeneration. Logging targets valuable hardwoods, opening canopy gaps that alter microclimate conditions the lemurs require. The tsingy formations themselves, while offering physical protection from some threats, cannot support lemur populations without surrounding forest. The limestone pinnacles provide refuge, but not food. Climate change intensifies dry seasons, stressing the deciduous forests that northern, sportive lemurs depend on for nutrition during critical periods. Hunting, while not traditionally targeting this species, has increased as Madagascar's bushmeat trade expands. Perhaps most concerning is the species' reproductive rate. Females produce only one offspring annually, and infant mortality is high. Populations cannot rebound quickly from losses. Conservation action focuses on the Ankarana Special Reserve, where northern sportive lemur populations remain relatively stable under protection. The reserve's management employs local community members as guides, guards, and monitors, creating economic incentives for conservation. Reforestation projects are connecting isolated forest fragments, establishing corridors that allow genetic exchange between populations. Research teams use radiotelemetry to track individuals, mapping their habitat use and identifying critical resources. This data informs management decisions about where to focus protection and restoration efforts. International partnerships have funded infrastructure improvements. Better roads allow tourists to reach Ankarana, generating revenue that supports both conservation and local development. Educational programs work with communities surrounding the reserve, explaining how healthy forests provide services, water filtration, soil stabilization, climate regulation, worth far more than the immediate cash from logging or land conversion. Some villages have established community-managed reserves on their own land, protecting sportive lemurs outside official protected areas. The Madagascar Biodiversity Partnership coordinates between government agencies, international NGOs, and local organizations, ensuring resources flow efficiently to where they're most needed. The question is whether these efforts can expand fast enough to stabilize populations before fragmentation and inbreeding push the northern sportive lemur past the point of recovery. Chapter 5. The Madagascar Pochard, the duck that rose from the dead. The sun rises over Lake Matsaborimena, and on its surface a small diving duck disappears beneath water stained red with iron oxide. For 20 years, the world believed the Madagascar pochard extinct. The last confirmed sighting was in 1991, and subsequent searches found nothing. But in 2006, a conservation team exploring remote volcanic lakes stumbled upon the impossible. 22 individuals diving for food in a crater lake so remote that no roads reached it. The species that science had mourned as lost was clinging to existence in a place so isolated that human eyes rarely found it. The Madagascar pochard belongs to the diving duck family, Cyanide, medium-sized waterfowl with rich chestnut plumage on the head and neck, contrasting with dark brown bodies and white undertail coverts. Males and females appear similar, unusual among ducks where sexual dimorphism typically runs strong. They're specialized divers, plunging beneath the surface for aquatic invertebrates, small fish, and plant material, able to stay submerged for up to 30 seconds while foraging on lake bottoms. Their biology reflects adaptation to freshwater lakes, strong legs positioned far back on their bodies for powerful swimming, dense plumage providing insulation in cold mountain waters, and robust bills for crushing snail shells and insect exoskeletons. Historically, the Madagascar pochard inhabited freshwater lakes, marshes, and slow-moving rivers across Madagascar's central highlands, an ecosystem of volcanic lakes and seasonal wetlands. They require deep water for diving, foraging, and dense emergent vegetation for nesting, requirements that make them sensitive to habitat degradation. These ducks form small, loose flocks outside breeding season, but pairs establish territories during reproduction, defending sections of shoreline where females build ground nests concealed in reeds. Like many waterfowl, they're long-distance flyers capable of moving between water bodies, a behavior that once allowed them to recolonize habitats after local disturbances. The species' decline tracks Madagascar's wetland destruction with horrifying precision. The Central Highlands were systematically converted to rice paddies, draining shallow lakes and marshes that pochards required for breeding. Introduced fish species, tilapia, carp, and black bass, altered lake ecosystems, competing with pochards for food and predating on ducklings. Siltation from deforested watersheds filled lakes with sediment, reducing water depth and clarity, making diving foraging less productive. Agricultural runoff introduced pesticides and fertilizers that poisoned pochards directly or collapsed their invertebrate food base. Hunting pressure, though modest compared to threats facing other species, still removed breeding adults from populations already under stress. The crater lakes where pochards survived were themselves degraded. Local communities introduced fish for subsistence fishing, and those fish disrupted the pochard's breeding success. But the rediscovery catalyzed an extraordinary rescue operation. The Durrell Wildlife Conservation Trust and the Wildfowl and Wetlands Trust launched an intensive captive breeding program, collecting eggs from wild nests and hatching them in Madagascar's first purpose-built conservation breeding facility. The gamble paid off. Captive pochards began breeding, and populations grew from 22 individuals to over 100 within a decade. Conservationists simultaneously searched for suitable release sites, identifying Lake Sofia as having the right characteristics: sufficient depth, intact fish populations dominated by native species, and community support for conservation. Beginning in 2018, captive-bred pochards were reintroduced to Lake Sofia in carefully managed releases. Juveniles were held in floating pens for acclimatization, then released gradually to allow them to establish territories and learn foraging behaviors. The reintroduction is working. Released pochards have survived, formed pairs, and most crucially, bred in the wild. The first documented successful reproduction outside Lake Matsaborimena in 30 years. The population at Lake Sofia now exceeds 50 individuals and appears to be growing. Conservationists continue supplementing with captive-bred birds while expanding searches for additional wild populations. Habitat restoration around Lake Sofia includes riparian buffer zones that filter agricultural runoff, controlled grazing to prevent shoreline degradation, and invasive species removal. Community engagement ensures local stakeholders benefit from conservation. Ecotourism brings visitors eager to see the duck that came back from extinction, generating income for guides and lodges. Environmental education programs work with schools around Lake Sofia, teaching children about wetland ecology and the pochard's remarkable story. The Madagascar pochard's resurrection from presumed extinction demonstrates that with sufficient resources, scientific knowledge, and community support, even species on the brink can be pulled back from the abyss. The acceleration continues across species boundaries. The ploughshare tortoise population in the wild numbers between 400 and 600 individuals, down from an estimated 10,000 in the early 20th century, a 95% decline driven almost entirely by poaching. Only 25 square miles of suitable habitat remain, and even within this tiny range, tortoises are not secure. Conservation costs for this species are the highest per individual of any Madagascar endemic. Intensive protection, captive breeding, and anti-poaching operations average $12,000 per tortoise annually. The northern sportive lemur population is estimated at 50 individuals across 3 isolated sub-populations, each too small to be genetically viable long-term. Habitat has declined by 97% from historical extent, with only scattered forest fragments persisting in a landscape dominated by agriculture. The Madagascar pochard, despite its remarkable recovery, still numbers only around 120 individuals total, 100 in captivity, and 20 in the wild, supplemented by releases. A single catastrophic event at either Lake Matsaborimena or Lake Sofia could devastate the species. Annual costs for pochard conservation, including captive breeding, habitat restoration, and monitoring, exceed $6,000 per individual. Chapter 6. The Fossa. The Phantom Predator. Something moves through the canopy like liquid darkness, longer than a cat but more sinuous, with retractable claws gripping bark and a tail as long as its body maintaining perfect balance. The fossa is Madagascar's apex predator, the evolutionary answer to what happens when carnivores evolve on an island without competition from big cats, bears, or wolves. It fills all those roles alone, a mongoose relative grown large and fearsome through millions of years of ecological opportunity. The fossa is the largest carnivore endemic to Madagascar, belonging to the family Eupleridae, a group of carnivores found nowhere else on Earth. Adults reach 6 feet in total length, including that remarkable tail, and weigh up to 26 pounds. They possess retractable claws like cats, flexible ankles that rotate nearly 180 degrees, allowing them to descend trees headfirst, and proportionally larger brains than most carnivores. Their bodies are built for 3-dimensional hunting, equal facility on the ground, in trees, and on cliff faces. Fossa are solitary and territorial, with home ranges exceeding 10 square miles for males, smaller for females. They're ambush predators with explosive acceleration, capable of taking down lemurs in mid-leap or ambushing ground-dwelling animals from above. These carnivores once ranged across all of Madagascar's forests, from humid rainforests to dry deciduous forests and even spiny forests in the south. They occupy the top of Madagascar's food web, with diets dominated by lemurs, but including everything from small rodents to birds, reptiles, and even juvenile domestic livestock at forest edges. This dietary flexibility once allowed fossa to thrive across diverse habitats, but it also makes them vulnerable. As prey species decline, fossa face nutritional stress. Their reproductive strategy reflects top predator biology: low reproductive rates, late sexual maturity, and long intervals between litters. Females give birth to 2 to 4 young only once every 2 years, raising them for over a year before independence. Population recovery from losses takes decades. The fossa's decline results from cascading ecological collapses. As Madagascar's forests have fragmented, lemur populations have crashed, removing the fossa's primary food source. Predators require vast territories encompassing multiple prey populations, and habitat fragmentation simply cannot support viable fossa populations. Human-wildlife conflict has intensified. Fossa occasionally kill chickens, ducks, and piglets, prompting retaliatory killing by villagers who view them as threats to livelihoods. This persecution is particularly intense in areas where livestock constitutes significant household wealth. Fossa are also caught in snares set for other animals, suffering horrific injuries or slow deaths. Cultural perceptions vary. Some communities view fossa with superstitious dread, killing them on sight, while others consider them sacred. Disease represents an emerging threat. As fossa populations become smaller and more isolated, they're increasingly vulnerable to pathogens, potentially including diseases transmitted from domestic animals. Conservation efforts are complex because protecting a top predator requires protecting entire ecosystems. The Ankarana Special Reserve, Ranomafana National Park, and Masoala National Park maintain populations of fossa, but even these protected areas face pressure from illegal hunting that removes prey species. Researchers use camera traps to monitor fossa populations, documenting their distribution, density, and reproduction. This data reveals a sobering reality. Fossa are absent from forests where they historically occurred, present only in the largest, most intact protected areas. Genetic studies show populations are becoming isolated, with limited gene flow between regions. Captive breeding programs have had modest success. Several zoos maintain fossa and have achieved reproduction, though the species proves challenging to keep. They're solitary, aggressive, and require large, complex enclosures. Community-based conservation represents the best hope. Programs that reduce human-wildlife conflict, building predator-proof chicken coops, providing compensation for livestock losses, training communities in fossa behavior to minimize encounters, have reduced retaliatory killing in some areas. Education initiatives explain fossa's ecological role, emphasizing how they control populations of rats and other crop pests. Ecotourism provides economic incentives, Tourists pay substantial fees for guided night hikes, hoping to glimpse wild fossa, money that flows to villages committed to conservation. The Madagascar Biodiversity Partnership coordinates research, education, and protection efforts. But the fundamental challenge remains. The fossa requires vast, intact forests teeming with prey, and Madagascar offers fewer such places each year. Chapter 7. The Greater Bamboo Lemur. The Cyanide Connoisseur. Watch closely as dawn breaks over Ranomafana's forests, and you might catch movement in bamboo thickets so dense they seem impenetrable. The Greater Bamboo Lemur emerges from her sleeping tree, golden brown fur damp with dew, and begins her daily miracle, eating poison. The bamboo growing here contains cyanide concentrations that would kill a human who consumed what she'll eat before noon, yet she processes these toxins with an efficiency science still doesn't fully understand. Greater bamboo lemurs belong to the genus Prolemur, recently separated from Hapalemur based on genetic and morphological distinctions. They're the largest bamboo lemurs, weighing up to 5 pounds, with thick fur, prominent white ear tufts, and powerful jaw muscles capable of crushing bamboo culms over an inch thick. Their dental adaptations are remarkable. High-crowned molars that resist wear from silica-rich bamboo and continuously growing incisors. These lemurs are bamboo specialists, consuming virtually nothing else, focusing particularly on giant bamboo species that dominate mid-elevation rainforests. They eat bamboo shoots, leaves, and especially the pithy centers of mature culms, the latter containing the highest cyanide concentrations. Their digestive systems employ bacterial fermentation to detoxify cyanide, converting it to thiocyanate that's excreted in urine. These lemurs inhabit mid-elevation rainforests in southeastern Madagascar, where giant bamboo thrives, particularly in Ranomafana National Park and scattered fragments nearby. They live in small family groups of 3 to 6 individuals, exhibiting complex social structures with multiple breeding females and shared infant care. Their territories center on bamboo groves, defended vigorously against neighboring groups through vocalizations and boundary patrols. Greater bamboo lemurs are cathemeral, active during day and night in irregular patterns, possibly related to bamboo nutrient content, which varies with time and season. Their ecological role is surprisingly significant for a specialist herbivore. By consuming bamboo, they prevent certain species from dominating forest understories, maintaining plant diversity. But specialization creates vulnerability. Bamboo forests have been systematically cleared for agriculture, reducing available habitat by over 90% since the early 20th century. The species now persists in 5 isolated populations, the largest in Ranomafana National Park, with perhaps 500 individuals. Each population is too small to be genetically secure. Inbreeding depression already shows in reduced fertility and infant survival. Bamboo itself faces threats. Climate change is altering rainfall patterns and temperature regimes, affecting bamboo growth cycles. If bamboo flowering patterns shift or certain species decline, greater bamboo lemurs lack dietary flexibility to compensate. Logging, though illegal in protected areas, continues in forests surrounding parks, shrinking the bamboo groves these lemurs require. Hunting poses minimal direct threat. Greater bamboo lemurs are not targeted, but snares set for other animals occasionally capture them. Conservation action has intensified as the species' situation has grown desperate. Ranomafana National Park provides core protection, with guards patrolling to prevent illegal logging and hunting. The Madagascar Biodiversity Partnership runs a long-term research program documenting greater bamboo lemur ecology, population dynamics, and health. This research has revealed startling information. Individual lemurs consume over 500 grams of cyanide-containing bamboo daily, ingesting toxin loads that should be lethal, yet show no signs of poisoning. Understanding this detoxification mechanism could have medical applications for cyanide exposure treatment. Reforestation efforts focus specifically on bamboo restoration, planting giant bamboo in degraded areas, and forest corridors connecting isolated populations. Community engagement provides alternative livelihoods. Ecotourism, bamboo craft production using sustainably harvested non-food species, agroforestry programs that integrate bamboo into agricultural systems. Captive breeding programs have achieved limited success. A few zoos maintain greater bamboo lemurs, but their specialized diet makes them expensive and difficult to keep. Access to fresh bamboo year-round requires greenhouse facilities or partnerships with botanical gardens. Still, these captive populations serve as insurance and educational ambassadors. The most promising development may be habitat connectivity. Satellite imagery and GIS analysis have identified potential corridors where bamboo reforestation could link isolated populations, allowing genetic exchange. These corridors require cooperation from landowners, government agencies, and communities, a complex negotiation, but one that offers the species' best long-term hope. Chapter 8: The Flat-Tailed Tortoise, the living fossil of dry forests. In Madagascar's western dry forests, where baobab trees swell with stored water and the ground cracks during 8 months of drought, a tortoise no larger than a dinner plate emerges from beneath leaf litter. The flat-tailed tortoise moves through dappled shade with surprising speed, its shell flattened and mottled with patterns that render it nearly invisible against the forest floor. This is one of Earth's rarest reptiles, found in a handful of forest fragments and driven toward extinction by forces it has no evolution-crafted defenses against. Flat-tailed tortoises belong to the genus Pyxis, endemic to Madagascar, with this species representing one of only 2 in the genus. Adults measure 6 inches in shell length, characterized by dramatically flattened carapaces, an adaptation for navigating through dense vegetation and hiding in rock crevices. Their shells display intricate patterns of yellow, brown, and black radiating from each scute, unique to individuals. These are surprisingly active tortoises, not the ponderous creatures stereotypically associated with the group. They're diurnal, most active during morning and late afternoon, and exhibit complex behaviors, including seasonal migrations between wet and dry season habitats, sometimes covering over a mile. Males engage in elaborate courtship involving head bobbing, circling, and ramming, and females show nest site fidelity, returning to the same locations across years. This species inhabits the dry, deciduous forests of southwestern Madagascar, areas receiving less than 20 inches of rainfall annually, concentrated in a brief rainy season. These forests feature baobabs, aluantus trees, and a diverse understory of succulents and shrubs. Flat-tailed tortoises exploit microhabitats, feeding in open areas during rains, but retreating to deep shade or underground burrows during the dry season's brutal heat. They're omnivorous, consuming primarily fallen fruits, succulent plants, and mushrooms, with occasional consumption of invertebrates and carrion. Their seed dispersal services benefit numerous plant species, particularly those producing large fruits that other animals cannot swallow whole. The threats facing this species are severe and multifaceted. Illegal collection for the pet trade has devastated populations. Flat-tailed tortoises are small, attractive, and relatively easy to transport, making them targets for smugglers. International demand, particularly from Europe and Asia, drives organized collection networks. Habitat destruction compounds the pressure. Dry forests are cleared for zebu cattle ranching, charcoal production, and subsistence agriculture. These forests, covering only 3% of their original extent, continue shrinking. Fire represents a major threat. Farmers set fires to clear land and promote grass growth for cattle. But these fires sweep through dry forests, killing tortoises directly or destroying the leaf litter and low vegetation they depend on. Invasive species, particularly rats and fire ants, predate on eggs and hatchlings, preventing population recruitment. The species' slow reproduction, females lay only 2 to 3 eggs annually, and individuals don't reach sexual maturity until 15 years old, means populations cannot recover quickly from losses. Conservation responses have been multifaceted, but remain inadequate to the scale of the threat. Several protected areas, including Tsimannampitsotsa National Park and Kirindi-Maitea National Park, encompass flat-tailed tortoise habitat, providing some protection from collection and habitat destruction. The Turtle Survival Alliance works with local communities to reduce collection, offering financial incentives for reporting smugglers and providing alternative income through ecotourism. Community-based conservation programs employ villagers as forest monitors who conduct population surveys and nest protection. Captive breeding programs have been established, though with mixed success. The species breeds in captivity, but securing sufficient genetic diversity requires continuous intake from wild populations, creating an ethical paradox. Reintroduction efforts are beginning, with captive-bred tortoises released into protected areas, where populations have been extirpated. These releases involve extensive preparation. Tortoises are fitted with radio transmitters, monitored intensively post-release, and supplemented with food during establishment periods. Early results are encouraging. Released individuals show survival rates above 70% and exhibit natural behaviors, including seasonal movements and breeding attempts. Fire management has become a conservation priority. Controlled burns during safe periods reduce fuel loads, preventing catastrophic wildfires during the dry season. Community education emphasizes the tortoise's role in forest health and its value as a unique heritage species. The challenge is scaling these efforts across the species' entire fragmented range before collection and habitat loss push remaining populations past viability thresholds. The crisis deepens with each passing year. The fossa population is estimated at fewer than 2,500 mature individuals across all of Madagascar, declining at approximately 10 per decade. Suitable habitat, intact forests with sufficient prey populations, now covers less than 30% of Madagascar's original forest extent, and even within this reduced area, prey populations are often depleted by hunting. Conservation costs for apex predators are inherently high. Protecting sufficient habitat to support viable fossa populations requires funding protected areas spanning thousands of square miles, averaging $3,800 per individual annually when costs are distributed across estimated population size. Greater bamboo lemurs number around 800 individuals across 5 populations, having declined 95% in 60 years. Bamboo forest habitat has contracted to approximately 200 square kilometers of suitable habitat, fragmented into pieces that cannot support long-term viable populations without connectivity. The flat-tailed tortoise population may number only 10,000 individuals, down from an estimated 100,000 40 years ago, a 90% decline driven by collection and habitat loss. Remaining habitat covers less than 5,000 square kilometers, nearly all of it degraded by fire and invasive species. Chapter 9. The Madagascar Big-Headed Turtle, the Ancient Wanderer of Rivers. Beneath the surface of the Manambolo River, where current carves through limestone gorges and sandbanks shift with seasonal floods, a turtle surfaces to breathe. Her head is disproportionately large, too big to retract fully into her shell, an ancient trait shared with some of the earliest turtles that walked with dinosaurs. The Madagascar big-headed turtle represents a lineage stretching back perhaps 200 million years. Yet everything she needs to survive is being systematically destroyed in a single human lifetime. This turtle belongs to the family Podocnemonidae, side-necked turtles that fold their necks sideways rather than retracting them vertically. The Madagascar species is the family's only surviving member in Madagascar, though related species persist in South America and Africa, remnants of Gondwanan distributions. Adults reach 16 inches in shell length, with females larger than males. Their massive heads house powerful jaw muscles capable of crushing mollusks and hard-bodied aquatic insects. These are freshwater turtles inhabiting rivers, streams, and seasonal wetlands of western Madagascar, areas with sandy bottoms and fallen logs where they bask. They're omnivorous opportunists, consuming aquatic vegetation, fallen fruits, fish carrion, and invertebrates, with diets shifting seasonally based on food availability. The species biology reflects deep aquatic specialization. Webbed feet for powerful swimming, the ability to remain submerged for extended periods, and complex navigation allowing them to return to specific nesting beaches across years. Females undertake remarkable migrations, traveling downstream during the dry season when water levels fall, then returning upstream as rains fill rivers. Nesting occurs on sandbars during the driest months, with females digging chambers above the waterline where eggs incubate in sun-warmed sand. Temperature determines hatchling sex, as with many turtles, and climate change threatens to skew sex ratios toward all female populations. The threats are as relentless as river currents. Habitat destruction through deforestation has altered river hydrology. Siltation from eroded soils fills deep pools these turtles require, while reduced canopy cover raises water temperatures beyond thermal tolerances. Dams fragment populations, preventing migrations between feeding and nesting areas. Fishing pressure is intense. Big-headed turtles are caught in gill nets set for fish, drowning before they can surface for air. They're also deliberately collected for consumption. Turtle meat is prized in some communities, and a single large female can feed a family. The pet trade, though less significant than for terrestrial species, still removes individuals from wild populations. Sand mining destroys nesting beaches, eliminating crucial reproductive habitat, and agricultural expansion converts riparian zones where females nest. Conservation interventions are expanding but remain insufficient. Several protected areas, including Ankarana and Bemaraha, contain rivers where big-headed turtles persist, though populations are small and declining even within reserves. Research programs use mark recapture studies to estimate population sizes and document movements, revealing that turtles travel far greater distances than previously understood, often leaving protected areas and entering unprotected rivers where they face intense exploitation. Community engagement focuses on reducing collection. Conservation agreements with fishing communities establish protected reaches where turtle harvesting is prohibited, often in exchange for development assistance, like school construction or clean water infrastructure. Captive breeding has proven challenging. Big-headed turtles require large aquatic facilities with flowing water and precise temperature control, making them expensive to maintain. Nevertheless, several institutions have achieved breeding success, and reintroduction programs are in planning stages. Habitat restoration projects include riparian buffer zones that reduce siltation, installation of fish passes around small dams to restore connectivity, and protection of key nesting beaches from sand mining. Education programs work with riverside communities, emphasizing the turtle's role in maintaining healthy river ecosystems and its value as a unique species found nowhere else on Earth. The fundamental challenge is that river conservation requires landscape-scale approaches. Protecting turtles requires maintaining intact watersheds, preventing deforestation in uplands, and managing water use across entire river basins, tasks that demand coordination between government agencies, local communities, and international partners. Chapter 10. The Silky Sifaka, the white ghost of the canopy. There are moments in the forests of northeastern Madagascar when sunlight catches white fur and the entire canopy seems illuminated. A silky sifaka, one of perhaps 250 left in existence, moves through treetops with gymnastic grace, launching its body through gaps in the canopy with perfect precision. Each leap is calculated, powerful hind legs propelling it across spaces that would mean death for less specialized animals. This is the rarest mammal in Madagascar, possibly the rarest in the world, a lemur whose beauty and ecological specialization have conspired to make it extinction's next candidate. Silky sifakas belong to the genus Propithecus, large lemurs known for their spectacular leaping locomotion and striking appearances. This species displays lustrous white fur with a silvery sheen, the source of both its common and scientific names. Adults weigh up to 14 pounds, with elongated limbs and reduced thumbs, adaptations for vertical clinging and leaping. Their faces are hairless and black, creating a stark contrast with their white coats. These are diurnal, living in family groups of 3 to 9 individuals with complex social structures involving multiple adult males and females. They communicate through a repertoire of vocalizations, including alarm calls that vary based on threat type, different calls for aerial predators versus terrestrial threats. This species inhabits primary rainforests in the Marojeji and Anjanaharibe Sud, protected areas of northeastern Madagascar, restricting themselves to high-elevation forests above 2,500 feet. These are among Madagascar's most pristine forests, wet and cool year-round, with complex canopy structures and extraordinary plant diversity. Silky sifakas are folivorous, consuming leaves, flowers, fruits, and seeds from over 70 plant species, exhibiting strong seasonal preferences. They're essential seed dispersers, particularly for trees producing large seeds that few other animals can swallow. Their feeding behavior shapes forest structure by selectively browsing certain plants and dispersing others. The rarity stems from multiple compounding factors. The species has always been naturally rare. Its specialized habitat requirements and small geographic range limited population size even before human impacts. Habitat destruction, while less severe in the rugged terrain they inhabit than in other regions, still threatens. Illegal logging targets valuable hardwoods like rosewood and ebony. Logging roads penetrate into previously inaccessible forests, opening them to further exploitation. Hunting represents a direct and devastating threat. Although traditionally taboo, the Fady protecting sifakas has eroded in some communities. Miners and loggers working in remote areas sometimes kill sifakas for food. Fragmentation is isolating populations. Even within protected areas, sifakas occur in small, scattered groups with limited gene flow. The species' slow reproduction, females give birth to single offspring every 2 to 3 years, means populations cannot recover from losses. Conservation efforts for silky sifakas are among the most intensive for any lemur species. The Aspinall Foundation leads field research and protection programs in Marojeji National Park, employing teams of local guardians who patrol forests, monitor populations, and prevent illegal activities. These patrols have documented all known silky sifaka family groups, tracking their movements, births, and deaths. The data reveals stable but non-growing populations. Births roughly balance mortality, but there's no increase. Community engagement provides alternative livelihoods. Ecotourism, sustainable agriculture, and craft production from non-timber forest products. Education programs work with children in communities surrounding protected areas, using silky sifakas as flagship species to teach broader conservation messages. Captive breeding is not currently feasible. No silky sifakas exist in captivity, and their rarity makes collecting founders ethically complex. Instead, conservation focuses entirely on wild population protection. Reforestation projects aim to connect isolated forest fragments, creating corridors that allow genetic exchange. Anti-logging enforcement has intensified, with arrests of illegal loggers and seizures of illegally harvested timber. International cooperation has strengthened. Madagascar receives substantial funding for biodiversity conservation, much of it directed toward Marajejong and other sites harboring critically endangered species. The challenge is whether these intensive, expensive efforts can be maintained long enough for silky sifaka populations to grow, or whether the species will slip into an extinction vortex of inbreeding depression, demographic stochasticity, and catastrophic events. Chapter 11. The Madagascar Serpent Eagle, the forest's silent hunter. Above the canopy, on a snag overlooking primary rainforest, a raptor watches. The Madagascar serpent eagle is motionless, chocolate-brown plumage blending with dead wood, yellow eyes scanning the forest floor below. Movement. A chameleon crosses open ground, and the eagle launches, dropping through canopy gaps with folded wings, striking with talons extended. The chameleon never had a chance. This is Madagascar's rarest bird of prey, an apex predator whose disappearance would signal the final collapse of the island's forest ecosystems. The Madagascar serpent eagle belongs to the family Accipitridae, a group of diurnal raptors including hawks, eagles, and kites. This species is medium-sized for an eagle, with adults reaching 26 inches in length and wingspans of 4 feet. Sexual dimorphism is slight, though females average slightly larger than males. Their plumage is deep brown with paler underparts, barred with darker brown, providing camouflage in dappled forest light. The species is an ambush predator, hunting from perches where they sit motionless for hours, dropping onto prey that ventures into the open. Their diet focuses on reptiles, particularly chameleons and snakes, hence the name, but includes frogs, small mammals, and occasionally birds. Their hunting strategy requires intact forest, with complex structure providing both perching sites and prey populations. Madagascar serpent eagles inhabit primary rainforests from sea level to 6,000 feet, distributed across eastern and northern Madagascar. They're territorial, with pairs defending large areas, over 3 square miles per pair, year-round. These eagles are monogamous, forming long-term pair bonds, and exhibit high nest site fidelity, returning to the same trees across decades. Nests are substantial stick structures built in emergent trees, used repeatedly and expanded each breeding season. They lay only 1 egg per year, and breeding success is low. Less than 50% of nesting attempts produce fledglings. This reproductive strategy reflects top predator biology, low fecundity offset by high adult survival. But this works only in stable environments, and Madagascar's forests are anything but stable. The species' decline tracks forest loss with mathematical precision. As rainforests have been cleared, serpent eagle habitat has contracted proportionally. The species requires primary forest. They cannot adapt to secondary growth or degraded habitats because prey populations don't recover sufficiently. Logging targets the largest trees, precisely those eagles use for nesting, eliminating breeding sites even from forests that remain standing. Human disturbance causes nest abandonment. Eagles are sensitive to activity near nests, and even well-meaning ecotourists can cause breeding failures if they approach too closely. Prey depletion represents an insidious threat. Hunting and collection have reduced. Chameleon and snake populations, even in protected forests, limiting food availability for eagles. Conservation for serpent eagles requires protecting entire forest ecosystems. Research programs use radio telemetry to track eagles, mapping their home ranges and identifying critical habitat features. Nest monitoring documents breeding success and identifies factors affecting productivity, disturbance, food availability, weather patterns. Protected areas like Masoala National Park and Makira Natural Park maintain serpent eagle populations, but even these strongholds face pressures. Community-based conservation establishes buffer zones around core habitats where human activities are restricted during breeding season. Education programs emphasize the eagle's role as an indicator species. Its presence signals forest health, its absence warns of degradation. Captive breeding is impractical for this species. Birds of prey rarely breed in captivity without extensive facilities and expertise, and Madagascar lacks infrastructure for such programs. Instead, conservation focuses on habitat protection and restoration. Reforestation projects aim to restore connectivity between forest fragments, allowing young eagles to disperse and establish new territories. Anti-logging enforcement prevents destruction of nesting trees. Camera traps monitor activity around known nests, detecting disturbance sources. International partnerships fund research and protection, recognizing that Madagascar serpent eagles represent unique evolutionary heritage. They're the island's only serpent eagle, filling an ecological role no other species can assume. If they disappear, Madagascar loses not just a species, but an entire functional group, with cascading consequences for forest ecosystems. Madagascar big-headed turtles number perhaps 10,000 individuals scattered across western river systems, down from an estimated 50,000 30 years ago, an 80% decline. Remaining habitat consists of fragmented river reaches, totaling less than 2,000 kilometers of waterway, much of it degraded. The silky cepheka population stands at approximately 250 individuals across 2 protected areas, representing a 95% decline from historical estimates. Suitable habitat covers perhaps 200 square kilometers, and populations are not self-sustaining. Births are not replacing deaths. Madagascar serpent eagle populations are estimated at 250 to 1,000 individuals, with uncertainty reflecting the species' cryptic behavior and dense forest habitat. Rainforest habitat has declined by 80% across their range, leaving populations isolated in fragments too small to support viable long-term populations. The safari, if it persists as a distinct entity, may number fewer than 100 individuals, making it one of the rarest birds in the world. Annual conservation costs for these species vary widely, but average around $5,000 per individual when protection, research, and community development are factored in, costs that Madagascar's limited resources struggle to support without international assistance. The ambiguous future. 2 paths diverge in Madagascar's remaining forests, and the one taken will determine whether these 12 species persist or join the roster of extinctions that haunt conservation biology. The worst-case scenario unfolds with mathematical inevitability if current trends continue. Within 20 years, the greater bamboo lemur will be extinct in the wild. Its 5 isolated populations will succumb to inbreeding depression, with the last wild individuals dying in Ranomafana's diminishing bamboo groves. The silky cepheka will follow within 30 years, as logging roads penetrate their final strongholds and hunting eliminates the remnant family groups. The ploughshare tortoise, despite intensive protection, will be functionally extinct in the wild within a decade as poaching networks adapt to enforcement efforts, with only captive populations surviving. The Indri and II, more widespread, might persist in isolated forest fragments as what ecologists call living dead populations, groups too small and isolated to be viable long-term but not yet extinct. Madagascar will retain its forests in name, patches of green on satellite images. But these will be empty forests, ecosystems stripped of their specialized fauna and undergoing unpredictable ecological transformation. The cost isn't only biological, but cultural. Madagascar will lose species that exist nowhere else, unique evolutionary solutions to ecological challenges, and components of its heritage that can never be recreated. But there are counter-narratives, examples that illuminate a different path. The Madagascar pochard, declared extinct, returned from the abyss through intensive intervention, proof that even the most desperate situations can be reversed with sufficient resources and will. The Mauritius kestrel, reduced to 4 individuals in the 1970s, now numbers over 800 through captive breeding and habitat restoration, demonstrating that recovery from single-digit populations is possible. California condors, extinct in the wild by 1987, now number over 500, with populations re-established in multiple states. These successes required decades of sustained effort, millions in funding, and coordination between governments, scientists, and communities, but they prove that extinction is not inevitable. Madagascar's future depends on scaling these success stories across dozens of species simultaneously. This requires 3 fundamental shifts. First, economic alternatives must make forest conservation more profitable than destruction. Ecotourism, carbon credits, sustainable agriculture, and ecosystem service payments need to exceed the immediate cash from logging and land conversion. Second, local communities must become conservation's primary stakeholders rather than its obstacles. This means ensuring that the people living alongside these species benefit directly from their protection, through jobs, development assistance, and recognition as conservation partners. Third, international commitment must be sustained. Madagascar cannot bear the cost of this conservation alone, and wealthy nations that consume products driving deforestation have responsibilities to support protection efforts. Public engagement offers leverage. 3 actions create meaningful impact. Direct support. Organizations like the Madagascar Biodiversity Partnership, Durrell Wildlife Conservation Trust, and the Aspinall Foundation operate directly in Madagascar, funding research, protection, and community development. Donations support ranger patrols, habitat restoration, and alternative livelihood programs. Monthly contributions, even modest ones, provide sustained funding that conservation organizations can plan around. Conscious consumption. Much of Madagascar's deforestation is driven by international demand for products: vanilla, rosewood furniture, exotic pets. Consumers can choose certified sustainable vanilla, avoid rosewood and ebony products unless certified legal and sustainable, and never purchase wild-caught Malagasy reptiles or lemurs. These choices, aggregated across millions of consumers, reshape market forces driving habitat destruction. Advocacy. Conservation policy is shaped by political will, which responds to public pressure. Contact elected representatives supporting international conservation funding, wildlife trafficking enforcement, and climate change mitigation. Share information about Madagascar's biodiversity crisis through social media, amplifying conservation messages beyond those already engaged. Support is particularly crucial for legislation funding USAID programs, enforcing the Lacey Act against wildlife trafficking, and maintaining commitments to international conservation agreements. The greater bamboo lemur sits in her bamboo grove, processing cyanide that would kill other mammals, a living embodiment of evolution's creativity. The Indri sings across valleys that once echoed with calls from hundreds of family groups, now silent. The ploughshare tortoise carries armor that evolution spent millions of years perfecting, now insufficient against organized criminal networks. Each of these species represents a unique solution to survival, a distinct expression of life's diversity, and a component of Madagascar's irreplaceable heritage. Their future, whether they persist or vanish, depends on choices being made today. The question isn't whether we know how to save them. The science is clear, the techniques proven. The question is whether we collectively decide they're worth saving, whether we allocate resources toward conservation rather than exploitation, and whether we act before demographic collapse makes recovery impossible. Every species lost represents a failure, not of knowledge, but of will. Madagascar's remaining species hang in the balance, their fate determined not by evolution's slow processes, but by human decisions made in this critical decade. What we choose now echoes through geological time, determining which species survive to see the 22nd century and which disappear, known only through photographs and genetic sequences archived in frozen repositories. Their future is being decided today.